Welcome everyone to another episode of Conversational Witchcraft with me, Dawn, the Kitchen Witch. Make sure that you like and subscribe and follow and all that jazz to this podcast. You can see all the great things that we're doing and all the amazing conversations that we're having, especially today. Oh my goodness. We have the amazing Celeste Larsen here. Celeste is a pagan, a witch, an author of the book Heal the Witch Wound, Reclaim Your Magic and Step into Your Power, which has been released April 1st, 2023. So it's a brand new book, baby. Her animistic worldview is the anchor for her spiritual and magical practices, which center around spirit work and using witchcraft for personal healing and empowerment. Originally from Texas, she now resides in beautiful Cork, Ireland, which makes us all here in the US very, very jealous. Celeste, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you. I'm totally obsessed with your Instagram, which everybody is. If you guys don't know it, it's Mage by Moonlight, and she's just incredible. So hi, welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Dawn. I'm so happy to be here.
I've been following you on Instagram for a while, but I kind of didn't put it together that you were the same person that wrote this book until I got the book from the publisher. And I was like, oh my God, I love her.
That's so funny. Yes, it is me. And yeah, I intend to be speaking a lot about the witch wound on my Instagram. So yeah, and I have been already, but yeah, we'll be many more posts about that.
Right, because this came out, your published date was April 1st, and we're recording this April 29th. This episode's not going to air for probably, this will be in June or July. So right now, this is just still a baby book. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's brand new, and it's not even out in the UK yet. It's coming out at the end of May in the UK. So those readers are still waiting for it. But yeah, brand new. My first book, baby.
Congratulations. It's a big deal, right? Does it make you like, if you're like me, it kind of makes you like super excited, but also makes you want to throw up at the same time.
Oh yeah, that's been the process, like since day one.
Right. Right. Cause you're like, I remember when I got my first book deal and getting the email that was like, we want to offer you a contract. And I go into the bedroom and I say to my partner, I'm like, oh my God, I got this book deal. I got this book deal. And then all of a sudden I was like, ooh, crippling self-doubt. Like the highs and
Yeah.
the lows of these kind of projects, right? It's amazing because you have been practicing witchcraft for how long now?
It's hard to put a number on it, since I started kind of dabbling from a pretty young age, but I didn't really claim the word witch or pagan for myself until I was in my mid-20s. Although I did grow up in a family that embraced that. So I was first looking up spells on the internet at the age of around 13.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and with my family, like we would go to tarot readers together. We would go to crystal shops and get our palms read. And my stepmom would read our palms and read oracle cards for us. So it was a great way to grow up. But
Wow.
even with that, I still struggle with claiming the term witch for myself.
That's really interesting. Most people that I talk to have kind of an opposite experience where like the witchcraft, finding the path of witchcraft is more of a, I don't want to say rebellion, but it's oftentimes a divergence from what they know. So you grew up in Texas?
I grew up in Florida.
In Florida. Okay, so
Yeah.
Florida and
So
Texas, I mean, the same thing,
same thing.
One is a
Yeah.
little bit more
A more
humid than
tropical
the
version.
right. Right.
Yeah.
One's got alligators. Like that's
Yeah.
it's the difference, right? But how was it again? Like you had this in the home, right? You had ideals of witchcraft in the home. So that spiritualism was in the home, but obviously there's not a lot of that in Florida. There's not a lot of that in Texas and those places being incredibly conservative, to use a nice term. I mean, we could get into it, but we shouldn't.
That is a
Uh,
nice term.
um, that must have been very difficult, even if it was within your family. You know, what was that like? Like friends and churches and school.
Yeah, so I never went to church growing up, which I think was also kind of a unique experience. Like,
Yeah.
I'm one of the few people I know who, like, never I never my family never set foot in a church, which, was kinda great having a clean slate, not having so much
Yeah.
religious baggage to unpack.
Yeah.
Um, but it was definitely for me like a societal cultural, pressure, like wanting to fit in, especially as I got into high school and college age. I went to college in the South in South Carolina, and that was like probably the place I repressed my spirituality the most,
Mm.
because it was the kind of place where people just ask like which church you go to. They don't even bother asking what your beliefs are in the first place.
Right, right. They're like, "Do you
And
go to the church of God or God's church?" Like, that's which is the one, like, which is the one?
Yeah, you only have a few options.
Right.
So, that was always a bit hard kind of embracing my true nature and talking about that. Um, and yeah, it like I kind of internalized that, like it did lead to me feeling disconnected from my
Mm.
spirituality. And when I graduated from college, I identified more as an atheist than anything else. So it
Now,
was
were
really
you identifying as an atheist, but were you still kind of doing, like, practices like reading tarot or carrying cards or stones with you?
not at all, no, I really I had a couple crystals, and that was the extent of my witchy connection, but yeah, I
Mhm.
really wasn't connected to that at all. I had one friend who I was able to sort of explore that with, like, we went up to Asheville, and I think we had got, like, an energy reading and got some crystals, which was a really nice day, and, we still explore that together, so it's been nice kind of growing with her, but, yeah, it did lead to me having to re-find my path and my practice, in my 20s after that.
And was there a catalyst moment to that? Was there like you know, a a a moment where you went, "Oh, crap, I've been denying this for so long, it needs to come out," and it was like this kind of like, teapot sort of coming to a boil, or was it more of a gradual getting back into things and realizing that was comfortable for your spirit and your heart?
It was definitely, as you said, sort of a teapot moment, which is kind of funny that you used that because so basically I started getting back into meditation. My mental health was just at like an all-time low. I was really
Mm,
struggling with anxiety and depression.
yeah.
And I was like, I have to make a change. Something is like not right here. Something's missing for me. And so I got back into meditation in a pretty secular way, but that process, like it just inevitably led me back to my spiritual path. Like I just couldn't deny what I was feeling in those experiences. And it was then that I started working with crystals and oracle cards again. And the card that I was pulling again and again at the time for like a year after I got back into this was eruption. And I feel like it was related to that and to the witch wound, like just suppressing my truth for so many years and like being afraid to speak my truth and being afraid to let myself be seen by other people and not upholding clear boundaries. And yeah, I that was definitely like a sign like something is building and you are going to erupt if you don't make a
It's
change.
it's really interesting that you kind of went back to these spiritual practices when you were dealing with mental health issues. And I don't think that the parallels between mental and emotional health and witchcraft and spirituality are talked about enough. I really don't. I think it's so important, and you talk a lot about this, right? The suppression of self and how it all relates to witch wound and mental health, and which is why your book is just fucking outstanding. But it's these things, they go hand in hand, right? Like once you start digging through or learning about um, your own mental health or how to manage it, or techniques like meditation that you can do in a secular way, um, they're all kind of dovetailed in with witchcraft practices and other spiritual practices and pagan beliefs and all of that kind of thing. And unless we take the time to sort of open that door, we might never connect those things. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting back into witchcraft and paganism and exploring my spirituality through those paths has been so healing for me. And I hear that from so many other people, like healing on a mental, emotional, like physical level. It just like reducing the stress in my body by getting outside more and finding ways to regulate my nervous system. I mean, we live in a very chaotic and stressful world, and taking the time to sit at your altar. I think I disconnected from you for a
Yeah,
bit there.
you dropped out for a minute. And this is probably going to keep happening. So I apologize. If you could just say that again. You said, connecting and sitting at your altar. Um, and then you cut out. So if you could just
Okay, yeah.
expound upon that again. Sorry, I
Yeah.
apologize.
No, it's Mercury in retrograde. It's
I
messing
know.
with us. But yeah, just taking that time for yourself to sit at your altar and connect with something, beyond yourself, connecting with the plants of the herbs that you're burning or connecting with your ancestors. Like it's healing for mind, body, and soul.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, meditation is so healing in so many ways because it allows us to sort of connect with higher self, but also with universal intelligence, with spirit, with gods and goddesses, with whatever's out there that's trying to kind of get through. You can't really have an open channel with those things when you're in your everyday moment where you're, checking your phone or on your email or going to work or whatever. It has to be in a moment where the noise is gone so you can hear what's behind the noise. And I think that's what meditation does. And I think that's what working through, mental and emotional health does. And like we said, it's all connected, which is kind of what you talk about in Witch Wound. So um I'm interested to know in uh I have like a bunch of notes that I wrote down. I was like, ask her this, ask her this. Um so obviously this book is amazing. Um at what point did you so first of all, before we get into all my other questions, for those people that are listening that maybe have not read your book yet, can you give us like a brief what is the witch wound so people know have a reference for what we're going to talk about?
Yeah, so the witch wound is a spiritual wound. It's very multifaceted, but essentially it roots back to the historical persecution of witches during the burning times and the witch trial era, but it also is alive in our culture. Like, yeah, we have the witch trials and there's past life trauma, ancestral trauma, all of that, but we also have in our modern culture a fear of witchcraft and a fear of spiritual paths that are different from the norm. And I mean, people who grow up in the church can often relate to feeling like they're going to be disowned or rejected by their friends or family if they come out as a witch. And that's a very real fear, even if we're not at risk of, the same fates that witches of the past were. We do have consequences, social consequences for owning our magic. And so that's the core of the witch wound, and it can make it feel unsafe to speak about our spiritual practices, unsafe to speak our truths in general, unsafe to share our emotions, trust our own intuitions, and yeah, it can have an effect on our own practices and our own psyches.
So how did you discover the witch wound and how did you discover that it was affecting you and your practices?
So I think looking back on my life, it has always been something that's been there for me from a young age. I've always had a real fear of being seen as different,
Mm,
and kind of feeling like too much and not enough for other people. That's really one of the symptoms of the witch wound that's been really core for me because on the one hand, I'm like a quiet, introverted person. And on the other hand, I have these interests that a lot of people might think are weird or crazy, or sinful, depending on who you ask. And that combination of factors just really made it feel like unsafe to be myself. And um, so, yeah, I can really see that looking back. But as I got back into witchcraft and was taking part in various healing circles, that was when I learned about the term witch wound. Um, and I just was like a light bulb moment for
Yeah.
me of like, yes, I relate to that. Like I felt it in my body hearing that and was able to connect so many dots. And that process really unfolded over years of like realizing, okay, that's what this experience is, and that's what this feeling is, and this symptom is.
And you were able to, at that point, name it, right? And then when you
Exactly.
name something, you're able to identify it and work through it. Whereas before, maybe when you don't have a name for what's how you're feeling, or this thing that kind of lives in the ether or lives in the ancestral body, you're like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. I just feel this way. And then once you name it, you're able to work through it.
Yeah, exactly. And, yeah, it just like I said, it's a very multifaceted thing, and so there were so many, like, past life memories and physical symptoms and fears and emotions and limiting beliefs. It's kind of all, like, wrapped into the witch wound.
I think it's really, really interesting because it's not like, as you said, it's a collective trauma. And you talk about this in the book, and you talk about the gendering of the witch wound, which again is completely fascinating. And I'm excited to be able to have this conversation now that we have verbiage to talk about gender in a more fluid kind of way, which maybe even 20 years ago we didn't have that sort of conversation. We couldn't have those conversations. We didn't have those words in our vocabulary. But you talk about in the book that 80% of people burned or are persecuted in witch trials were women, but 20% were men,
Mhm,
right? And we don't think about that, right?
mhm.
So that gendering is a very big deal. And I want to kind of dig in deeper into that as well. But we also you talk about in the book, the othering of people,
Mhm,
right? Not just you're a woman, but you are a woman who is maybe outspoken, maybe unmarried, maybe you know how to make this herbal tea that makes everybody's stomach feel better. You are different. You are not fitting into what the collective says you should be. And then when we extrapolate that out into, we look at the world that we're looking at right now and the rampant hate of things that are other, be they people of color, be they LGBTQ plus, be they women, we realize that we're all, quote, othered. And so we have that commonality. Can you talk about all the, I just threw a bunch of shit out to you, but like, I want to open up the conversation into that because it really, it's an important conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's probably my favorite topic to explore and discuss of like this whole witch wound topic is like is that of like the othering of people and the fear of the other, because it does happen today and that fear is very much alive in our culture. And it's such a small like population who is not othered. Like you have men who are straight, white, Christian, and wealthy. I
Right.
think that about covers it.
Right. And that's like 4% of people, you know,
Yeah, and, they also happen to be the people who have most of the power, and so, of course, they have fear of the other because they've had power since the start of patriarchy and since the start of capitalism, and industry, and so this fear of the other is kind of a fear of the other having power. And you can see that looking at witch trial records in the way that the victims of the trials were accused and the way that they were punished. So you have women who perhaps never married, or maybe they married and their husband died and they inherited the property. That's a woman with wealth, a woman who's not adhering to gender norms. And often these women they did have to beg their neighbors for money. They relied on their neighbors for food. These were often not wealthy women. Sometimes they were. Like you have both sides of the same coin. You have women with wealth and you have women on the extreme opposite end. And that was a threat because these women who were impoverished, they would often be very outspoken. This is something Sylvia Federici talks a lot about in her books, and was just fascinating for me to read through, about how these women would, like, go door to door, and they would curse their neighbors in the streets, and they would talk about how, this isn't fair. I hope something bad happens to you. And they would be accused of witchcraft. And it's pretty, like, it's not subtle what's happening.
Right.
And
Right.
yeah, you still see this kind of thing happening today. Like, you still have people, I mean, the conversations around drag shows
Ugh,
today, and conversations around women and abortions, like, it's the same kind of rhetoric of trying to take away power and doing it in a way that is making the people involved seem evil or crazy or bad. Yeah, so
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And it is, again, that othering and that trying to strip others of power. And I can't speak to people of color and their experiences because I am not a person of color, and I can't speak to uh queer community because I am bisexual, but I live a heterosexual lifestyle, right? So and I don't think I've ever even said that publicly before. So um I can't speak to these other experiences, but I can speak to being an overweight woman in my 40s and a witch. And so many times I have felt like I'm not being listened to. I have felt like maybe I shouldn't, like you said, shouldn't be too loud, shouldn't be too quiet, can't be too authentic, can't tell people who I am, can't be open about sexuality, can't be open about witchcraft because I'm afraid of being judged, right? And now we're seeing freedoms and rights being stripped away from women, again, women and people of color and LGBTQ. And all of that is, as you said, related to power, right? It's the othering. It's someone saying, I'm afraid of you because you have some kind of power. I perceive you have some kind of power that could potentially harm me. I mean, we don't. We're not trying to hurt anybody. We're just trying to go about living our damn lives, just like the
Mhm,
witches that were burned, right?
mhm.
These
Yeah.
women that you're describing that were surviving by asking people to give them food and then being like, well, fuck you. You're not going to give me any food. Hopefully you'll starve to death, an offhanded comment. You're a witch burner, right? And how is it for you doing all of this research and being able to draw those parallels so directly? Is that incredibly frustrating, or do you feel a sense of duty to speak about these things?
Yeah, I definitely feel a sense of duty. So when I was writing the book, I spent probably the first, like, 2 months or so, maybe, really just doing research because there was so much to dive into. I really didn't even get started with writing the rest of the book during that time. So it was diving into these research books. It was, yeah, like, reading trial records, reading confessions, and
Wow.
reading books like the Malleus Maleficarum. I didn't read it front to back, but flipping through it, which, for those who don't know, the Malleus Maleficarum is a witch hunting handbook that played a very important
Yes.
role in the trials. And reading these texts was just like, oh my gosh, like, just some of the most just disgusting ideas that you could imagine in there, about women and why we have to discriminate against women, why women are more sinful and lustful. Like, literally says women will just sleep with demons because they're so lust filled that they'll, like, literally do anything, and that's why you can't trust women. Um,
Was that the
and
thing that surprised you the most in your research, or was there something else that really surprised you in your research?
I feel like it really was the propaganda was. It was just, like I said, not subtle at all.
Or like, we're not even trying to be like, well, they're like, here's propaganda. Let's just bash you over the head with it.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's basically what the entirety of the Malleus Maleficarum is about, is
Oh,
making a case against women. And, yeah, it had a lot of sway back in the day. So, yeah, and I felt so many emotions doing this research. Like, I felt so much anger, especially reading some of the accounts of the executions. There were times when I just cried reading them because it was so horrible to read about what some of these people went through and like the methods of torture and execution that were used. Um, so yeah, that it was, heartbreaking in some ways. It was infuriating in other
yeah.
ways. And but I am glad that I did the research because it just really did ignite that feeling of like, maybe not in the same way, but the same kind of things are happening today. Like people are still being targeted for being other and having their rights taken away and having their right to happiness stripped away. Like people can't feel safe living their lives in the way that they want, and that's not okay. And it's the same systems at play. It's still patriarchy, it's still misogyny, it's still capitalism, it's still ableism and racism and white supremacy. It's the same as what was happening.
Right. And it is terrifying. I mean, it is terrifying. If you watch, and I try not to watch the news, right? Because it's horrendous. Um, but I was reading something or listening to something just yesterday where this poor woman, I don't know what the situation was, but she went septic in her pregnancy and she was in Texas and could not could not get the life-saving surgery um in her state to save her life, and had to fly and drive and get where she was going, wherever she could to get the surgery, and have to go over state lines, and it was like 48 hours of searching for someone who would do this surgery so that she could live, because the doctors wouldn't remove the dead fetus, and because they're afraid they're going to go to jail or it's illegal or whatever's going on in Texas. She survived, thank goodness. And now she's fighting and she's suing the state for these crazy ass laws, and rightfully so, because she almost died. And then you look at that and you say, well, what about the people that weren't as lucky as she was? What about the women who don't have healthcare or don't have someone to drive them out of state or don't have a job where they can take off a couple of days? And who does that hurt? Moreover, it hurts people that have other layers of othering, right? Communities of color, people that are, maybe in a lower socioeconomic place. It's going to hurt them more. What I want to know is why the fuck are these old white guys so intimidated by people having agency over their own bodies, their own happiness, their own spiritual practices? How in the world is that a threat? I still don't know. And it must be infuriating for someone like yourself who has done so much research to go, are we still having this conversation?
Yeah, it's absolutely infuriating.
How are we still talking about this? How is this? How are we still, women are still being persecuted in these ways and being, killed or neglected just because they're women?
Yeah, it's shocking, it's mind-blowing, and I think that is why it's so important to talk about it. Um, yeah, because we are in a position, and this is something, it can sound a bit doom and gloom, and I try to not take that route in the
Right.
book because I want people to feel empowered and inspired to act rather than paralyzed by fear. And the truth is, we do have more protections than the people of the past did. We have people who are truly taking our rights away. Like that's a fact.
Yeah.
And there are layers of some people are have more of a risk to their physical safety by being their true selves than other people do. Like people who are of color, people who are in the LGBTQ plus community, for them coming out as a witch or being true to themselves in whatever way is authentic to them, there are more layers of risk there than there are for other people. All of that said, we don't have people burning at the stake. We don't have people being hanged. We don't have people being imprisoned or exiled from communities. So in that sense, oh, and we have the internet. We have the internet, which the people of the past couldn't even imagine,
Right.
like the magic of this ability to connect and share
Yes.
ideas. So it is so important to connect and to speak out and to stand up for communities that we're maybe not part of, but we recognize the injustices that are happening and feel that sense of duty.
So important, like you said, to have that sense of hope, of healing this larger witch wound, and then being able to take that into ourselves and into our communities, and into the world at large. And we're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors, and then we come back. We're going to talk about the hope and the healing that comes from understanding the witch wound, and how do we move forward. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Conversational Witchcraft. We are having a very intense conversation with Celeste Larsen, the author of Heal the Witch Wound. And before the break, we're talking about some heavy shit. I mean, that's the truth. This is the heavy shit. This is the world that we're living in. But now that we understand what is the witch wound, where does it come from, and how is it even affecting our world today? Let's talk now, like you said, Celeste, about hope and healing and getting through that. Um, we're going to get into that reclaim your magic and step into your power part of this book. And I have to say, um, chapter 6 and chapter 7 of your book, I've read like 3 times each. Just those chapters. Like I've read the book, but those chapters really stand out to me. And they are about um, muting your self expression and feeling lost and stuck and blocked, due to this huge witch wound that we're talking about. So let's talk about how the witch wound can affect us personally in that respect. And then how do we heal those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's many ways that the witch wound can manifest itself in one's life. And again, that's because it's something that is a psychic spiritual wound. It's something that can be ancestral, passed down in our bodies, that's played out through the generations before us. And it's also cultural, like it's in our collective unconscious and it exists on a societal level. So with all of that said, the main way that people think about the witch wound manifesting is sort of this feeling like you have to hide your magic or stay in the broom closet, so to speak. So that would look like basically not telling people that you're a witch, not telling people that you're a pagan or whatever labels you use for yourself, kind of downplaying that. Something that I have shared a lot about on Instagram, and I talk about this in the book as well, is like, and I still do this. I don't want to give off the vibe that I like have transcended the witch wound and I don't struggle with this anymore.
Right? It's a
Um,
practice. It's a
yes.
practice.
Yes. So for me, one of the ways that this manifested was I referred to everything I did as meditation. Like I could have had like the most wild ritual where I was like naked in the moonlight, screaming to Odin around a bonfire, and
Right.
I would still be like, "Oh yeah, I meditated last night," because
It's a really intense meditation.
yeah, because meditation's something that, like, anyone's like, "Oh, cool, that's great, I meditate too."
Right.
But to kind of, like, say, "Oh, yeah, I was naked around a bonfire screaming in the moonlight," is like, "What, you were doing what now?" So, yeah, and not that you have to share all the personal details of your rituals, but that was a way for me of downplaying, was really watering down the way I spoke about things, like, I would say, "Oh, I'm a spiritual person," and not, "I'm a witch," because I felt like people could accept that and take that in without being completely shocked. Um, so that's one way that it certainly shows up. But then what you were talking about with just in general, like a fear of expressing yourself, a fear of speaking your truth, of being authentically seen. And that can also relate to limiting beliefs. So the belief that, I'm not good enough, that if I am my true self, people will reject me. It's not safe to be me. Nobody cares what I have to say. I'm not good enough to do this. I'm not good enough to write that book or start this project or, pursue this path. These are
Hmm.
all limiting beliefs that people struggle with, and it can manifest in ways that don't even have to do with magic or witchcraft.
Right.
Um, and again, this goes back to, you have people in the witch era who were very outspoken and were literally silenced for that reason, because of speaking their truth, because of being different, because of practicing herbalism, and the local priest didn't like that. And, you know, that's what happened. And so yeah, we have that collective memory alive in us, and it can manifest in a lot of different areas, and it can come in the form of ancestral and past life memories as well. I've certainly spoken with people who have experienced that. And again, it doesn't have to explicitly tie into magic. It can be, my family's always had isn't actually my family, but could be someone's family, like a scarcity mindset, like a feeling of,
Yeah.
I'll never make enough money, or like I can't spend money that I've made.
Right.
Um, to give an example that is in my family, it's like a fear of being wrong. Like, it's so funny. I noticed that I have this letter from my great grandfather, where, like, I think someone in my family, maybe it was my grandfather, interviewed him, because a lot of people in my family are interested in like genealogy and
Mhm.
collecting ancestral memories, which is so nice to have. But it's this letter, like a one-page letter, my great grandfather, like, talking about his life highlights of moving from Denmark and working on a farm and all of these life highlights. And then at the bottom, he also talks about how one time he like measured the milk wrong and got in trouble. And that's like made it on there with the names of his kids and like immigrating to another country. Like, it was so profound for him that he got accused of doing something wrong, which I thought was
Wow.
fascinating.
Right. Like it was so important to him, along with these great life accomplishments. One time I got something wrong and it was
Yeah.
devastating. Well, and isn't that true? Like, even just in our own personal lives, like when you're a child, you don't remember somebody praising you. Like somebody could have told you, your parent could have told you, oh, you're smart, you're smart, you're smart, you're smart. But one time, one teacher might have said, you're really not that smart. That's the thing that you remember. You don't remember all these other times, and it kind of sticks with you. And I want to just touch on something you had said about that not feeling good enough and all of that. And I think getting back to the gendering of the witch wound, and it being something that is, I don't want to say quintessentially female, because as we've discussed, it's not, it's really about the othering of, but as women, we are already in society getting all these crazy ass signals and what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do, who we're supposed to be pretty, don't be too pretty, be friendly, but don't be slutty, be sexually interested, but don't, but make sure that you're still innocent, like it's all this, we don't understand who we are, what we're doing. So to be brave enough to say, hey, I am different, and I'm different by the fact that I'm a witch, or I'm, you know, proudly part of the LGBTQ community, or I'm proudly, I love, to be Lizzo, right? I'm in my body and I love my body. And people are like, oh my God, she's the devil because she's fat and beautiful. Like they can't make that work in their brains. I think that's how we see this witch wound in our own personal selves. Yeah. What, I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, it's exactly like you said, like, women are fed these messages about, being this, but not too much and not too little. Like, it's a very fine line that you have to walk. And yeah, the same thing was happening like hundreds of years ago of, being feminine, but don't be too different, like, I mean, yeah, we have the same thing happening today. And
Right.
I think it shows up for so many people. And again, there's those layers of, if you're a woman of color, or if you are a woman in the LGBTQ community, then you have these even further like limitations placed upon you, where it's even easier to fall over that line into too much or not enough for people. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really challenging to navigate that. It's hard.
So then what steps do we take as witches, whether or not we're comfortable yet? How do we get comfortable and say, this is who I am? What do we do in our own private practices to get to that point?
Yeah, so it's certainly something that takes time, and it's a journey, which I think is is beautiful and great. I feel like healing is always a journey. I've never experienced a healing that's just like that
That's
overnight. That's not how it works.
right. Like it took us hundreds and hundreds of years to get this messed up. We can't think that one spell's going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I just like to say that it is something that will continue to probably be a work in progress. It is in my own life as well. Um, but I think sometimes the first step is the hardest. Like it takes a lot of courage and a lot of trust in yourself to like have that first share to open up to somebody. And you can start small. One of the ways that I started opening up was not even verbally. I just would leave stuff around the house, like when I would have guests come over. And so they could, like anyone who's been in my house, they knew,
Right.
they knew what was happening because there'd be witchcraft books everywhere and like pentagrams. And I mean, you can see what I'm
Right.
working with here.
Right.
Um, and yeah, just from there, like that was an easy way to get started because then people could ask me questions and I could answer. Or sometimes like, I have a personal Instagram account as well, for just friends and family. And I would like, just share something kind of witchy there. Like I would repost something or I would like post an Instagram story of like some runes or something. And these were just easy ways to get started that weren't me standing up and being like, "Hello, everyone, I'm coming out as a witch," because that would
Right.
be terrifying to do.
Right. I mean, and
Um,
it really is terrifying. I mean, listen, I live my life as a public kitchen witch. I've built a business, I've built a podcast, I have a brand around the witchcraft that I do. It's taken me, I've been practicing witch for 23 years, maybe longer. And still, I have never said the words to my mother, I am a witch.
yeah,
Never, never.
I know.
I
I
never,
relate.
right? Like I said it to my father when he was sick, when he passed away of cancer a few years ago. But when he first got sick, I was like, listen, I gotta tell you something just in case, you know. And he was like, yeah, I know. He's like, oh, that's fine, but don't ever tell your mother. You know, like that was literally what he said was, don't ever tell your mother. Now I don't hide it. I
Mhm.
don't, I live my life. I wear my jewelry. My house is the way I want it to be, but I've never said the words because when saying the words to a certain person, you can't then take that back and you don't know how that would affect that relationship. So, what advice would you give for someone else in my situation?
Yeah, I mean, at least in my experience, I've found that saying the words out loud, "I'm a witch" to people doesn't really need to be the goal, and it's not the most freeing part of the process. The most freeing part is living your life in the way that you want to, and people can make whatever assumptions that they have. They can ask you questions if they want to or not.
Mm,
But for me and for many people, it's just about feeling the freedom, like, the boundaries are broken, the limitations are broken. Like you can say what you want about yourself, you can wear what you want, you can decorate your home the way that you want, and to not feel that you have to shrink yourself or change yourself to fit someone else's expectations. So for me, I have, all of my immediate friends and family know I'm comfortable to tell them that I'm a pagan witch, but I have many other people in my life who, again, I haven't said those words to, at least not in that such an explicit way. But they know, they also like they see me, they know about my Instagram, they even know about my book, but I still just have never vocalized the words. So like they know, and I don't have to say it.
right. And
And it's
there, like you're
not
saying, therein
nice.
lies the freedom is I'm
Yeah.
living my life regardless of what you think of me and thereby healing this wound because I'm brave enough to live the way I want to authentically.
Yeah. And that feels so good to do that. Like I used to think that I would never be able to, honestly. Like I didn't think I could ever let people just see the real me and not feel some kind of fear or even shame about that. And I do sometimes have those moments where I feel a little anxious, especially if I'm like meeting someone new who's, let's say, like a family friend or someone like who I just, I don't know, there's like certain environments where you feel a little more like, am I being judged? But I still go into it not changing myself and accepting maybe I will be judged. Maybe this person will judge me and they'll reject me and they won't like me. And that's okay because I don't have to be liked by everyone. I have to like myself. Like, that's the most important thing, because at the end of my life, when I don't have anything else, I don't have anyone else, I need to feel good with how I lived my life and who I am and how I spent my time here. And that's going to matter a lot more than what this person at this party thinks about me right now.
150% hell yes.
Yeah.
And again, like it doesn't sound, when you say things like that, it doesn't sound like witchcraft, but it is, because that kind of belief in self and that kind of healing of your own personal traumas and then these ancestral traumas, that's how we walk through the world, inspiring others and helping others. And that is magic. It it is. I mean, that's how it's
Yeah.
done, right? Like, we cannot hope to heal these larger wounds in our communities, in our societies, if we're not healing them in ourselves first. And we can't possibly hope to do really transformative witchcraft if we are not working on what makes us tick and what makes us happy or unhappy. We can't do that work. At least that's what I believe. Do you believe the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it is a form of magic. It's internal alchemy, and it does radiate outwards to affect the communities and the circles that we're in. And it certainly had an impact on my practice as well. Like, just having that sense of like opening within me, and everything. I feel more rooted in myself. I feel confident in what I'm doing. I don't feel like fear or shame or guilt about practicing witchcraft. And that allows me to go into my rituals and do spells without those kind of like internalized shadowy feelings. And it does help my practice.
I have to agree with that 100%. Like, when I first started out, and I think specifically, I'm a native New Yorker, and then I moved to New England, and I had a pretty robust personal life in New York, but there wasn't a lot of spiritual community there for witches and pagans, because of where I was and how it was spread out. And then when I moved to New England, we had these groups that were very welcoming and kind of clustered together. And I remember going to my very first like group ritual on my own and being like, oh God, even within the community, am I witchy
Mhm.
enough? Am I not witchy enough? I don't want to be too friendly. I don't want to be too standoffish. It's all those social things that you feel like it's like going to, school for the first time and be like, am I going to make a friend on my first day? That kind of thing. And then at some point, allowing myself to say, you know what? This is a safe space because everyone here shares a certain belief with me. So I can be however I want to be in this space. If I want to take off my shoes and dance around, I can. If I want to, go to the drum circle, I can go over and drum. If I want to do, I can do any of those things, and allowing myself to be moved through that moment, even within that space. So that freedom that comes from allowing yourself to just be.
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced those same feelings of self-doubt going into safe spiritual witchy spaces. Again, the same like, am I witchy enough? Do I know
Right?
enough? And I think if you just go in with openness, like, nobody knows everything. Like, there's not one person in there who knows everything.
Mhm.
To be open to learn from people who do know more, or who have more experience than you, and also to share your own experience, because you probably have more to share than you think that you do. And you never know who's watching and is going to be inspired by you. Like you said, if you're the first, someone has to be the first to take off their
Right?
shoes and dance. And there's probably everybody sitting there feeling nervous and anxious about, is everyone going to be looking at me if I express myself? But by being the first to do that, or even just by joining in, other people are going to feel more inspired to express themselves freely as well. And no one's looking at you and judging you. They're really in their own heads. and you're helping
Right?
them by just being yourself and showing up.
Right. Someone asked me once when I was giving an interview, not being the interviewer. Someone asked me, like what thing would you tell your younger self? And I would literally tell my younger self, no one's fucking looking at you,
No.
right? Because now in my 40s, I'm like, I don't care. I like me. I'm working my spiritual life. I'm doing what I'm doing. And no one's looking at me, but as a younger person, especially as a younger witch, thinking, am I doing this right? Is somebody going to judge me? Oh, I might got to make sure that I dress super witchy because I'm a witch and I have to identify this way and like kind of overcompensating for that, right? Instead of going, yeah, I'm comfortable and I can wear, leggings and a t-shirt and I'm still a witch. So there's this,
Yeah.
that push and pull of am I doing enough or am I doing too much or that overcompensating and finding that comfortable space within yourself, which is part of this healing, right? That you're talking
Yeah.
about. It's just
Yeah, it
awesome.
absolutely is. And
It's just
that kind of
awesome.
just makes me think of something that you said, like, there's so much stigma about, especially for women, like, growing older, and this is a bit of a tangent, but that's been such a nice thing about getting older. I'm 31, and I have so much more confidence and give so much less of a shit what people think than I did in my 20s,
Girl,
and
wait for 40. It's
I'm
the
excited about
best.
40. Yes.
It's the best. I remember when I turned 30 and all my girlfriends were like, oh my God, you're 30. We're all old. Our life is over. And I was like, are you
Oh.
kidding? I'm like, 30's the best. 30's awesome. I was like, I'm over the bullshit of my 20s. I know who I am and I know what I want. And in the next decade, between 30 and 40, these are the things that are going to happen in my life. This is what I'm going to do. And then I turned 40 and I was like, look at all the shit that I did between 30 and 40. Oh my God. And now I'm 43. And I'm like, I know exactly who I am. I know exactly where I want to be. I'm at that point where I can now do more development in the places I want to do the development because I'm more sure of myself. I have more resources. I don't give a shit about what people think. I there's such a freedom in growing older as a woman and a wisdom that I didn't know existed until I hit these milestones. So honey, watch out because this is it gets better and better and better. Like it's awesome. It's
I believe
awesome.
it. I 100% believe it. Yeah,
And I
I'm looking forward to every future decade.
seriously, I mean, you ever see like who is Helen Mirren? She's like almost 80 and she says the same thing. She's like, I love my life. I love my body. I don't give a shit what people are talking about. She's like, I feel good. I eat dessert for breakfast. Life is the best. And I'm like, honey, I am there. I am there. I want to be that crazy old witch hanging out in my backyard, picking dandelions and making omelets out of them. Like that's what I want to. And I'm in my 20s, I would have been like, oh no, that's so weird. I'm not doing that. Psh. And then I would have done it anyway, but in secret.
Yeah,
Now as I'm older, I'm like, this is how I'm going to spend my Saturday, and it's the best.
I know, I know. Yeah, that, like, crone level is one that I am very much looking forward to.
It's
One day,
it's
I'll enjoy this time until I get there, but, yeah, I just that
right.
was something that came to mind because I so often see that, like, just all it's been happening forever, the stigma about aging and losing your youth and your beauty, which is just bullshit anyways because,
Right.
women get more beautiful as they get older. Like, people give that grace to men and they don't give the same grace to women about aging. And anyways, that's just another
True.
aside feminist rant
True.
that
They're
had to
always,
come out.
it's always like, here, use this wrinkle serum, and here, use this makeup, and I'm like, well, be my partner. I was sitting on the couch and watching TV, and like these beauty ads come on, and I'm like, they're marketing to the wrong person. I don't. I'm good. And people are always like, God, Dawn, your skin's so pretty. And I was like, I don't put anything on it. I don't do anything. Like this is sun and olive oil. And
I
that's it.
love that.
That's it. But it is when we look back and to bring the conversation more full circle and you look at the phases of the healing that we do as women, the healing that we do as witches, the longer we do it, the easier it becomes. The more
Yeah.
we practice these things, the more simple and reflexive they become. And then we're able to take that into our communities and into our world. And that's how we go about healing these wounds. So I have to say, Celeste, your book, I read a lot of books and I interview a lot of people. Your book, Heal the Witch Wound, which first of all, it's fucking beautiful. Um, it's one that I want to have every one of the women in my life read. I think it's an incredibly important topic, and I think you handle it with such grace and also with such intelligence. You know, your research really comes through, and literally reading it, I was like, "Oh, she's talking to me. She's talking to me. Yep, yep." It may as well just had like every sentence be like Dawn. You know, like it's just. I mean, like again, like I have like this earmark, the limiting beliefs part, like every single woman in my life needs to read this book because I think it will give them a deeper understanding of why they feel the way they do and allow them to understand that we are not alone. We share these feelings collectively and we can heal collectively as well. So thank you for writing this
Yeah.
beautiful book.
Thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to hear that feedback. And that's why I wrote this book. I honestly went into this writing it the book that I most needed. And that's kind of how I live my life. Anytime I dive into a project, I think like, what would be my most favorite version of this thing that I'm working on? And I'm going to strive to create that. And I love doing that because I find that other people often have the same needs and the same desires out of this thing, whether it's a book or something else. And also, it's just another form of showing up in my most authentic way. Like, I had so much doubt in this writing process of like, oh, some people are going to think it's too this. Some people are going to hate that I talked about this way, or at least these are the fears that I have. Um, but I had to decide, like, I don't care. I literally cannot please every single person who's going to pick this up. I have to just write this in the way that I think is right, which is an act of healing the witch wound in itself is the process of doing that.
And you did it beautifully, beautifully. Celeste, tell everyone where they can find you online and where they can buy your fantastic book, Heal the Witch Wound.
Yes, thank you. So you can find me basically anywhere: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Don't really use Twitter anymore, but it still exists out there. At Mage by Moonlight, at Mage by Moonlight, or my name's Celeste Larsen. My website is also magebymoonlight.com, and Heal the Witch Wound is available essentially everywhere books are sold. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, or you can also find it at your local witchy shop or bookseller. If they don't have it, you can always ask them if they'll stock it.
Yes, support your local bookstores, support your local witchy shops. Okay, Celeste. So we'll have all of your information on the show notes. So anybody can click and find that on the show notes and then be able to follow you. Her Instagram is freaking awesome. So follow that for sure because it'll give you all kinds of inspiration and insight. Final question. This is my signature question. I ask it to everyone that comes on the show, and it has nothing to do with anything we've talked about today. If you could have me as a kitchen witch make you one magical meal, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. Wow, so many things come to mind. I think what I would most love, it's just kind of my like most nourishing meal is just like a very hearty veggie soup, like some carrots and potatoes and lentils and like
Mm,
kale, like just all of these earthy, fruity vegetables are like my favorite thing. And they make me feel very grounded.
yeah.
Um,
Are
with
you a
lots of like,
vegetarian?
I'm not a vegetarian, but I eat a lot of veggie meals. Um, and it feels so like ancestral and kind of
Yeah.
magical to me. Also, like having this soup, like, I mean, you literally have a big pot, like a cauldron stirring. So yeah, I would love for you to come in my kitchen and make me like the witchiest, earthiest soup.
I make the most as you're describing that, I'm going, oh, I should make you Italian. I would make you Italian wedding soup. So my recipe for Italian wedding soup actually has like little tiny turkey meatballs. That's why I asked you if you eat meat. And then it's like white beans and cabbage and kale and carrots. And um, I put a little red pepper in there, and then I do tomatoes, and you just let it. It's best when you do it with like a really beautiful veggie broth or a bone broth and lots of garlic, and then you just let it simmer and bubble all day long, and it is like it is heaven on a cold night. Like it is so, like you said, it's just so nourishing. I would make that for you because I think it would make you so happy.
It would make me so happy. That sounds so good.
She's like, I need to go get some soup right now. Cause by
Yeah, I'm
you,
gonna go.
it's evening now, right?
Yeah, it's about 5 p.m., so
Dinner
I'm gonna
time for
go
you.
see if I have the ingredients for an Italian wedding soup.
Celeste Larsen, thank you so much for being here. This was so wonderful. Find her at Mage by Moonlight everywhere you can find her on the internet. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time, everyone, I wish you so many blessings and so much gratitude. Thank you.